everyone, and welcome to Booming Encore's Learning Bites. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. As a result of COVID-19, everyone's daily lives have been impacted, not only in our regular routines, such as how we work or even get groceries, but many other aspects of our lives have also been impacted. For example, weddings postponed, graduations have gone virtual, and often even our bucket list could have been suspended. This situation could cause people to be frustrated and even anxious, having their lives impacted and interrupted. To help us better manage and cope with this situation, I'm delighted to welcome back Dr. Sean Hayes. Dr. Hayes is a clinical psychologist and co-founder of Cohesio, and he's here to share some suggestions on what we can do. Welcome, Dr. Hayes.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. Nice to speak to you.
So Dr. Hayes, even though there are some restrictions that are being lifted, many still are not. How do we manage our emotions as we cope with these remaining limitations being put on our lives?
Well, I think the key, as you just said, to cope with and adjust to the remaining limitations that likely will not go away. I think part of the challenge most of us are facing, at least probably for many of your audience, this is the first time we've ever had to deal with a chronic stressor. We may have experienced acute stress, a death, a divorce, a mourning, a job loss, but there's an ending and a start to it. We always talk about see the light at the end of the tunnel with those types of stress. This is a very different type of stressor. It is external, but it is also chronic. It will not go away. And many of those limitations or restrictions on our lifestyle won't go away. There's a terrific analogy I read somewhere that said to the effect of acute stress is an elastic band that springs back. Chronic stress is an elastic band that's been stretched for too long, too frequently, or too intensely. It loses its resilience and does not snap back into its original shape. I think that kind of is the way most of us might feel these days. I don't know if that rings true for you.
It certainly does. I definitely feel stretched, but are there some specific actions that we can do to help make us feel better about our current situation?
Yes, there is some research that comes out of resiliency and coping with long-term chronic stress. And there's a couple of tips that come about sort of reestablishing our sense of resiliency. First of all, and it sounds somewhat simplistic, but it's refocusing on your losses or your vulnerabilities onto your strengths. Regardless of what this pandemic has done to our lives, and it's done a lot, there are still key aspects of who and what you are that are strong, that have not changed, that will persist. So finding those strengths in ourselves and in those around us and kind of refocusing on those, it sounds somewhat simplistic, but it really is looking at the half full rather than the half empty. Another key part of this, and unfortunately, and this is supported by evidence, unfortunately, it's something women tend to do more than men, but I think many men do it too, is listen for your own negative self-talk. We have a tendency, particularly if we're very driven or very A-type personalities, to constantly question. So we'll go, somebody will make a suggestion, I'll say, yes, but. As soon as I said yes, but, I haven't listened to the suggestion. Or if then, or I can't, or that won't be possible. When we tend to say those a lot, repetitively, and half the time we do it without even knowing we're doing it, it's completely unconscious, it reinforces a negative perception of the world. It reinforces what can't happen, what we can't do. The last thing that we found is very successful and helps for a lot of us is finding pleasure. Now, I know that sounds a bit odd, so let me clarify. Pleasure can be in a lot of the little things that give us a sense of security and normalcy about the simplicity in life. For example, there's evidence to show that listening to very predictive music like jazz has a very distinct bat, can actually reinforce a sense of feeling good about ourselves. Watching media or reading books that are very familiar and have, for lack of a better word, a very specific schedule. You know pretty much what's going to happen. So if I was to ask for you what kinds of movies you think of that yes, there's a bad guy and there's a villain and the good guy does get beaten up a bit. But in the end, it always turns out well. What would that be like for you?
Well, it's funny. The first thing that came to my mind was, how we watch the Christmas movies year after year after year, because we know what's going to happen. We know that there's going to be a happy ending. We know that it's going to make you feel better. So that's definitely predictive for sure.
Very predictive, very simple. Rom-coms, romantic comedies, thrillers, particularly if the thriller has a star, because you know the star is not going to get done in. So the Mission Impossibles, those kind of things that fundamentally are fun and exciting, but very predictable, can actually give us a great sense of pleasure in the world.
So it's really almost going back to practicing gratitude, which we've read so much about, and it's so good for your mental health. That's really like one of the key components of this. And then, as you mentioned, trying to find the small pleasures or the things that you already know that are going to give you pleasure, and embracing that. Is that sort of what you're suggesting?
And catching yourself on the negatives, because I think most of us, particularly at this stage in our lives, we're very driven, we're very accomplished, we have a tendency to constantly push ourselves to the next level. And this is not the time to say what I haven't accomplished, what I can't do, or yes, but. This is the time to be proud of little things. Laughing example, I am not a handyman by any way, shape, or form. I tackled our iron railings on our 19th century house, stripped them down, repainted them. It looks really good. And I'm having a greatest sense of accomplishment. Now, will I ever do that again? No. But for the time being, it's given me a great sense of fulfillment and pleasure to do that.
Okay, so that's sort of the day-to-day stuff. But what about like major life events, for instance, that we're planning on doing? Like if you were going to retire and take that, dream vacation, or you were going to go visit relatives in another place, and now that's all been curtailed. Like, how do you get over that? How do you get past the disappointment and possibly even anger around this?
Well, I think you've hit something very important. I think it's, first of all, to accept that you are angry or that you feel betrayed. I mean, there's almost a sense of betrayal because I've worked so hard. I've spent 40 years getting through school and building and now to see all that taken away by things that I can't control, I think it is a sense of betrayal and anger and loss. I think we actually need to formally mourn it, even to do a little ritual around the loss of those. I have a colleague who she shared with me recently that she took a list of all her dreams, her bucket list, many of which will not likely be possible, at least not in the immediate 5 to 10 years. She wrote them down and she burnt them in the barbecue. For her, it was a very ritual way of saying, okay, I'm going to say goodbye to those dreams, but I'm going to write new ones. That's probably a little more formal than most of us wanted to do, but the notion was we do need to mourn those. We do need to say, I may not be able to be a snowbird now for the next 5 years, and I have to let go of that. But then think about, what did those dreams mean to you? What was the value behind those dreams? What were you seeking to achieve? So, for example, you said a dream trip. What was motivating you to take a dream trip, for example?
So, for example, either a new experience or a bit of adventure or whatever that trip may have entailed were probably some of the things that were motivators, I'm assuming.
Exactly. So yes, it also maybe was tied to seeing Bali, which is probably not going to happen. But what could you do to replace that sense of adventure? So I've talked to some colleagues in Canada who are saying, you know what, there's parts of Canada I've never seen. I've never seen Prince Edward Island. I've never seen the cliffs of Newfoundland. I've never been to Charlevoix, which is a very beautiful area east of Quebec. So thinking about how can we make an adventure to do things that actually, ironically, people from around the world come to every year and we don't see in our own back. So find other ways to give yourself that sense of something to look forward to create a fun trip that you can do, to create that sense of adventure so it doesn't feel like you've just given up something and not had something else.
Those are some excellent points. Now, what happens though if we can't actually travel? For instance, we're using that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some things that we can do at home that you would suggest that might, I hate to say, give you that sense of adventure? I mean, you mentioned redoing your railing, but I'm sure probably some people are going, okay, dream vacation, redoing my railing, maybe not a match, or is this just something that we're just going to have to deal with?
No, I think you're right. I think there are ways to find another way to give us some sort of sense of excitement and something to work for. So let's say you've been saving for a trip, and that's unlikely. Where's that money that you were saving for that trip? Whatever you had planned, can you put that into a renovation? Contractors are looking for work and are very active these days. Can you put into building that pool that you always wanted to have and sort of have put off? Are there other things you can do to give you a goal? Now, it doesn't mean you have to actually execute those goals. Let's be honest, half the time those trips probably never would have happened either. But it's to give us something to look forward to. So one of the things I ask people to do is just say, where would you like to be in 3 years? Assuming that all of this current restrictions are there, what would you like to be doing in 3 years? How would you like to make that happen? And envision a new journey, a new adventure, a new possibility. This is going to sound strange, but I've heard that for the first time in history, all of the pet rescue centers are empty because people are fostering dogs.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are discovering they actually quite like this. It's giving a whole new adventure, a new sort of sense. And they're also doing something that's giving back, which a lot of us have lost that feeling in the last few months. It's something to give back, something, I'm serving someone, I'm taking care of this. And of course, many of them end up falling prey and adopting the dogs, but it's a way of, I'm doing something for somebody else. And that's another key part of this. Find a way to do something for others, to give back, because a lot of us have felt that's been taken away from us, and we need that. That's part of who we are.
And so it's just basically reframing the whole situation and your thought process around it. And I hate to say, like you mentioned, grieving and you're letting things go, but then moving into what some people are calling the new normal.
Well, I have just a slight challenge. Remember we talked about it earlier, but I almost wonder if we need to drop the new normal, because in saying new normal, we're saying, well, then there was a normal before. There's a comparative. This is what 2020 is. This is what 2021 will be. What else can we do? What can we do to make 2021 exciting? What can I look for in 2021?
So it's really just living in the moment, and so this moment that we're experiencing right now is normal, and trying to embrace it as that, rather than thinking about what, like we said, what you've lost or what you may have had to give up. It's more about what you have and what you could possibly do. So it's a real switch in how you view the world, so to speak.
A rewrite, but probably one that we could do anyway, needs to do now, just make it a little more conscious. Really think about, what are the other adventures I didn't do? What are the other things I wanted to take on that I've always talked about, that I could do in another form?
No, that's some excellent advice. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And to everybody out there, I hope you found this information valuable and helps you live your best booming encore. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye-bye.